The river had always whispered through the valley long before the surveyors came with their clipboards and GPS devices. It curled around the eastern ridge like a sleeping serpent, feeding the wild grasses and the old cottonwoods that had stood for over a century, and beneath that ridge, deeded in faded ink on a 1923 land grant, was 42 acres that belonged to Elias Grayson. He wasn't a loud man. He didn't attend town meetings or argue at zoning boards. He lived in a cedar-shingled house with a sagging porch, raised bees in the back, and walked the property line every Sunday with a rusted surveyor's rod his grandfather had used. The land had been in his family for 5 generations. It wasn't much to look at and even rocky, with patches of marsh near the creek, but it was his dot. Then the signs went up. Willow Bend Estates, coming soon. Renderings showed tidy 2-story homes with stone facades, manicured lawns, and a community pool. Elias stood at the edge of his woods, watching the bulldozers chew through the underbrush. He didn't recognize the men in hard hats, didn't recognize the yellow stakes marking lots. He drove to the county office the next morning. The clerk pulled the records with a frown. "There's an easement dispute from 2008, she said. The HOA filed a quiet title action, claimed adverse possession. Court ruled in their favor. Didn't you get the notices?" Elias hadn't. His mailbox had been knocked over by a deer that winter. The letters had rotted in the mud. By the time he hired a lawyer, it was too late. 35 homes had already been framed. Foundations poured. The judge said the paperwork was clean. The process followed. The land, according to the court, was now part of the Willow Bend development. The new neighbors tried to be kind. A woman from Lot 12 brought him a casserole. A man from Lot 7 waved every morning. But Elias didn't wave back. He watched them through the screen door, silent, as they watered their lawns and backed SUVs out of driveways built on soil his ancestors had walked. Then came the storm. 3 days of unrelenting rain swelled the creek into a churning brown torrent. The HOA board sent out alerts. Avoid low-lying areas. Do not approach the old dam. It was a relic from the 1940s, wooden beams, iron hinges, buried under vines and time. County records said it was decommissioned, forgotten. But Elias knew it still held. He waited until midnight. Rain drummed on his hat, the wind howling through the pines. Flashlight off, boots sinking in mud. He reached the rusted wheel that controlled the sluice gate. It hadn't turned in 80 years. He poured oil from a tin can, worked it back and forth until, with a groan like a waking beast, it gave one turn, then another. A shudder ran through the structure. Water seeped at first, then gushed. The earth trembled. The pressure built, silent and terrible. Back on his porch, he sat in his father's rocking chair, hands folded, watching the valley below. Lights flickered on in the new homes. Car alarms wailed. Silhouettes darted behind windows. The water moved fast, thick with debris, rising over driveways, swallowing patios, creeping up the steps of the clubhouse with the HOA logo still glowing above the door. He didn't smile, didn't cheer, just watched. And when the first house tilted, then slipped into the current like a dream, dissolving, Elias closed his eyes. The river, after all, remembered
Morning
what the
came
courts
gray
had
and
forgotten.
still.
The rain had stopped, but the air hung heavy with wet earth and the sour smell of soaked insulation where there had been streets. Now there were channels of slow-moving water, littered with splintered fences, children's toys, and the bloated remains of porch swings. Neighbors stood in clusters, wrapped in blankets, staring at what was left. The entrance sign, "Welcome to Willow Bend," where community grows lay half submerged in the mud. One corner caught on a broken hydrant. No one spoke much. Phones didn't work. The power was out. The county said rescue crews were coming, but the roads were washed out. Elias walked down the ridge trail just after dawn, his boots steady on the slick path. He didn't go near the crowd. Instead, he stopped at the edge of what used to be Lot 19, where a young couple had planted a cherry tree in a ceramic pot. It now floated in a stagnant pool, roots exposed, petals scattered like ash. A woman from the HOA board spotted him. "That's him," she said, voice low. "Elias Grayson. Lived on the ridge. Never signed a single covenant, did he?" Someone started. "I don't know," she said. "But the dam wasn't supposed to open. It was sealed." No one accused him out loud, not yet. But eyes followed as he passed. Back at his house, nothing had changed. The foundation sat high on the slope, untouched by water. His bees hummed in their hives. The garden was muddy, but intact. That evening a knock came. It was the young man from Lot 5, soaked and shivering. "Sir," he said, "we just want to know, did you know this would happen?" Elias looked past him, toward the darkening valley. "I knew the dam held water," he said quietly. "I knew it hadn't been inspected in 60 years. I knew they built on a floodplain. That's not what I asked." Elias met his eyes. "I opened the gate. The river did the rest." The man didn't call the police, didn't yell, just nodded slowly, and walked back into the dark. By midnight, a generator buzzed to life in the parking lot of the ruined clubhouse. A single light flickered on. Someone had found a satellite phone. The message went out. "Willow Bend is gone. Need help." But no one mentioned the man on the ridge. The news crews arrived on the third day. Helicopters circled like vultures, filming the wreckage from above. A reporter stood knee-deep in muck, describing a tragic infrastructure failure and questions about outdated dams in rural communities. The county engineer appeared on camera, shaken, admitting the structure hadn't been assessed since the 1960s. Elias watched it all from his porch, sipping black coffee. The TV had crackled to life that morning, and with it, the world's gaze. They showed aerial shots, the curved scar of the flood, the sunken roofs, the community garden now a swamp. They interviewed a woman holding a photo album salvaged from the floodwaters, pages swollen and blurred. "We had no warning," she said, voice breaking. "No one told us we were at risk. No one mentioned the land deed. No one mentioned the court case." But online, things began to shift. A local historian dug up the 1923 land grant, scanned it, posted it with a timeline. Grayson family owned the land for 180 years. HOA claimed adverse possession after unverified notices were mailed. Comments flooded in. Who was really trespassing? They built homes on disputed land and blame a dam. What happens when progress forgets history? The HOA board held an emergency meeting in a borrowed church hall. Tempers flared. "We followed the law," one member insisted. "The court ruled in our favor." "But did we do right?" asked the woman from Lot 12, the one who'd brought the casserole. "We never tried to talk to him. We just built." Silence followed. Meanwhile, a county inspector climbed the ridge, accompanied by 2 deputies. They found Elias splitting wood. "Behind his shed. We need to inspect the dam site," the inspector said. Elias wiped his hands on his jeans. "It's all yours." They walked the path together. The dam was broken open, beams cracked, gate twisted. This was manually released. The inspector said, kneeling, "Hinge marks, oil residue." Elias said nothing. The deputies exchanged glances but didn't speak. The inspector took photos, then turned. "You're not in trouble, Mr. Grayson. This was a failure of oversight. The HOA should have known this was a risk zone. The dam should have been demolished." One deputy hesitated. "You saved lives, you know. Water moved slow at first, gave people time." Elias looked at the valley. "I didn't do it for them." Back at the house, a letter had been slipped under the door. "No return address." Inside, a single sentence. "We didn't know it was yours." He didn't reply. Recovery moved slowly. Trailers arrived on higher ground, temporary housing for displaced families. A food truck came every morning. Children played in the parking lot of the church, drawing pictures of houses with crayons. But something had changed. No one rebuilt. Not yet. The county declared the area a high-risk flood zone. Insurance companies backed out. The developer vanished, leaving behind only a website that now read, "Project on hold." Elias continued his routine. Morning walk, bees checked, garden tended. But now, when he passed the lower trail, people nodded. Not with anger, not with fear. With something quieter. One afternoon a girl stood at his gate, 8 years old, with muddy boots and a notebook. "You're Mr. Grayson?" she asked. He nodded. "My dad says you lived here first. Before everyone." "That's right." She held up the notebook. "I'm writing a story for school. About the river. Oh, can you tell me what it was like before?" He looked at her for a long moment, then stepped outside, closing the gate behind him. "Come," he said. "I'll show you the spring." They walked to the head of the valley, where clear water bubbled from the rock. Wild mint grew along the edges. "This," he said, "is where it all begins." She sketched in her notebook. Did the river miss the land when the houses were there? Elias paused. Rivers don't miss, they remember. Back at the house, he found a jar of honey on his step. No note, just a label, from Lot 9. That night, he lit a lamp in the front window, a habit from his youth, a signal that the home was awake, that the owner was present. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a ghost on his own land. Spring came early. The floodplain, once covered in concrete and sod, began to heal. Wildflowers sprouted in the mud. Willows sent up green shoots. Birds returned. A proposal surfaced, turned the ruined subdivision into a conservation area. No more homes, no more HOA, just protected land. With walking trails and educational signs about watershed history. The county held a public meeting. Elias attended. Sitting in the back, a young woman stood to speak, daughter of the original developer. "My father saw profit," she said, "but I see what we lost. Not just homes, respect, balance. I withdraw all claims to the land. Let it go back." Murmurs filled the room. Then, applause. Elias didn't clap, but he nodded. Afterward, a man approached Hall with a camera. Documentary filmmaker. He said, "Mind if I talk to you?" Elias studied him. "You want the dramatic version?" "No, just the truth." They sat on the porch the next day. The camera rolled. Elias spoke slowly. About the land, the court case, the rain. "I didn't want revenge," he said. "I wanted them to seek, to know whose ground they stood on." The filmmaker didn't edit that part out. The conservation area opened. A single sign stood at the entrance. Grayson Valley Preserve, honoring the past, protecting the flow. Elias was invited to the ceremony. He wore his father's coat. The mayor spoke. A choir sang. Then, silence. Elias stepped forward. "This land," he said, "doesn't belong to me, or the HOA, or the county. It belongs to the river, to the roots, to the bees. We're just here to listen." No one forgot. children came on school trips. They learned about deeds, floods, and forgotten histories. They dipped nets in the creek and found crayfish, and every Sunday Elias walked the ridge, surveyor's rod in hand. Sometimes, someone joined him. On his 78th birthday, Elias sat on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the trees. The bees were quiet. A breeze carried the scent of blooming thyme. A car pulled up unfamiliar. A man stepped out, holding a folder. Mr. Grayson, I'm David Chen. I found your story online. I live in the city now, but I grew up in one of the houses that washed away. Elias waited. I used to hate you, the man said. Thought you'd destroyed everything. But then I learned about the deed. About the notices that were never delivered, I realized. We were the ones who didn't look. He handed over the folder. Inside, a proposal. A scholarship fund for environmental history, named after Elias's grandfather. No need to decide now, David said. Just wanted you to know some of us learned. Elias closed the folder. The river teaches patience. That night, he lit the lamp again, and from the valley, carried on the wind, came the soft, steady sound of water moving, remembering, flowing home.